All right, how's everyone doing today? Nice to see some familiar icons and names on the list there. Thanks for taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about LinkedIn. Before we begin, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about my background before we start. I'm an independent social media consultant to mid-sized and large companies here in the Twin Cities. I've been doing that for about 13 years. The work usually revolves around social media audit strategy work, content work, or as we're going to talk about today, training and coaching, increasingly around LinkedIn, actually. I'm also a professor at the University of St. Thomas. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. Enjoy that. And in addition, I have a number of other ways that I kind of interact with people on social. I have a blog at erichansen.com. I have a podcast that I run with my friend Kevin Hunt from CHS. I have a weekly e-newsletter that I know many of you are signed up for, but if you're not, where you can find jobs and information about social media marketing. So a number of ways to interact with me. You can find most of it at erichansen.com if you're interested. But we're here today to talk about LinkedIn specifically. So what we'll talk about today over the next 45 minutes to an hour is how to build an effective presence on LinkedIn with a step-by-step process. So it's similar to the process I use when I coach executives, but I think it's a key process in kind of refining that really anyone's approach, including my own, to LinkedIn. How to show up more consistently in the feed, and how to find your voice, which I know is a big one. How people always are asking, what do I post about? What should I share? That kind of stuff. We'll talk about that today. And if there's anything specifically you want to learn more about today, please post it in the chat and I'll check that. I'll try to check that at the end if we have time. And if not, I'll probably take some of those questions and develop some content around it and post that at a later date at the very least. So with that, before we talk about, what we do on LinkedIn ourselves, I think it's always healthy to step back and kind of take stock of what the current state is and where we're at now. And if I look at the current state of LinkedIn, at least our industry, I see a lot of this. And I'm not picking on, I don't know these two women, I'm not picking on these two women at all. I just picked them randomly from a big agency and a big company because I didn't want to pick on anyone locally. But these are pretty representative of what I see a lot of on LinkedIn. And one is on the left, you can see Carly is talking about jobs, right? I catch them, which is great, right? People go to LinkedIn to get jobs. Why wouldn't you talk about jobs? This kind of posts are very common and they're great, but the downfall of them is that there's no context in here as to why anyone would want to join Catch Up and work with Carly at this agency, right? And that's with where we're at with the job market and the current climate. Like, that's everything, right? The good people right now can take their pick of the litter. They don't just because you have a job open at Catch Them doesn't mean I want to apply for it. So it's missing the why, it's missing the culture, it's missing the pull with a lot of the job posts that I see online. So that's number one. And then number two is Anne on the right with McDonald's, where she's sharing a post from the McDonald's account, which again is great. If you're not prideful of the place you work, like there's probably something wrong with the situation, right? So you shouldn't be doing this kind of things, but I see a lot of it. And what I see with some people is that's all they do is talk about their employer and to share their posts and that kind of things. And we all know that Anne most likely is much more than just McDonald's, right? Like, she's got perspectives on industry topics. She's an interesting person with hobbies and volunteer opportunities of her own. She's not all about McDonald's. There's no way that's true. So I want to see the rest of what she brings to the table, and so does everyone else. So in my mind, the priority mix of content is all wrong for a lot of people on LinkedIn right now. It's always company first. It's frequently about jobs without the why, and there's not a lot of regard given to the way people use LinkedIn, which is usually one of three things. They're usually using LinkedIn to find a job. But again, we talked about like more of the culture and more of the why around the job. They're using LinkedIn to get smarter. So they want to learn, whether it's a skill, learn more about their industry, what have you. And then number three is they want to build the network. They just want a network. So again, if you look back at some of the content mix we're talking about, where it's company first and jobs without the why, that's really not hitting on much of that at all. And that's kind of what's happening right now. Now, that said, there are some good things happening out here, and people I see that you could emulate and really doing things, I think, the right way. For those of you that are local here in the Twin Cities, you might have heard of or know Stacia Nelson. She runs a comms agency called Pivot. I've known Stacia for a number of years. We've become good friends. I've also been coaching her for the last couple of years. And I always tell her, though, you need to fire me. Like, you don't need me anymore, because she's doing stuff like this pretty much largely on her own. And she's become a great case study in terms of, especially at a leadership level, in terms of, leaders using LinkedIn the right way, where she's, capturing visuals, she's storytelling, she's talking about the agency, again, in a different way, not in a we have jobs open way, more in like a what makes Pivot different way. Just a lot to like about what Stacia's been doing on LinkedIn. Number two, I would say Monica Wyant, who was formerly with US Bank. I believe she's between jobs right now, but she's always, to me, been, whether she was working at US Bank or not, has always been someone I've followed closely because of the way she utilizes LinkedIn. And again, she even when she was working at US Bank, she very rarely talked about US Bank. Like, once in a while she would, but more often it was this kind of stuff. She's talking about this mentorship relationship with this Minnetonka High School student, which was great. Look at that great picture, right? And now recently she's been talking about the job transition and how she's handling that and what she's doing to manage it. But that's also interesting too, right? She's opening up and talking about a very personal topic in an interesting way. And you can see the engagement on this post that Monica got. I mean, look at this, almost 500 likes and 38 comments. I mean, she's kind of one of those people where when she says something on LinkedIn, I think people perk up, because she also hits on another key aspect of LinkedIn, is that I wouldn't say her frequency is super high, but when she says something, it's really good. So it's that whole quality over quantity discussion. So those are two women that are pretty senior in their careers, though. What about if you're on the junior side? Well, I would point you to a very recent grad and a Tommy, and someone that was in my class a year ago, Anna Zoller, who just graduated and has a job with JT Mega as a copywriting intern. But she has proven in a very short amount of time that she has a very good grasp of how LinkedIn operates, where just these two posts alone kind of tell the story. One of which is during her time at St. Thomas on the right, where she was talking about a class project she was involved in, how impactful it was to her, that kind of thing. And on the left, now that she's out of school, now she's talking about what work life is like in the real world and going to events like this EdFed DEI workshop that she recently attended. So again, strong understanding of how visuals operate, strong understanding of storytelling, and strong understanding of how and why people are using LinkedIn. So she's a good example of someone that's just kind of starting out and getting things right. So just a few examples to get things started. But I think, we all have an opportunity to kind of refine our approach on LinkedIn. Again, like I said before, me too. When it comes to using LinkedIn to build out our network, which if you follow me online or know me, I'm a huge believer in the network and how that's one of your most valuable professional assets. Building out your personal brand to create future opportunities. I know personal brand is a bit of a buzzword, but okay, substitute reputation for personal brand if that bothers you. You're building out your reputation on LinkedIn. That's absolutely what you're doing every time you go on there or you don't go on there. And creating future opportunities, whether that's jobs or clients or just professional friends. And then third, and not to be discounted lightly, is your ability to hone your writing and social media skills on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is becoming a huge platform for brands. Obviously, if you work in social media marketing at all, chances are you're going to touch that. But above and beyond that, just your writing skills in general. We could all stand to hone our writing skills, right? And LinkedIn gives you the opportunity to do that.
If I can turn the volume down, I can hear you.
If you so choose.
Okay,
so
sorry about
lots
that.
of opportunity.
How are you?
For all of us on LinkedIn.
Good.
So what can you do to be more effective on LinkedIn? This is kind of the step-by-step process that I sometimes take executives through, to a lesser extent, or leaders. And I think it's relevant for all of us, where it's optimizing your profile,
Is that
building a
something you
community,
do? I mean, I'm just
listening-
putting a border around the
listening
flower
to
bed.
conversations,
And,
engaging with the right discussions,
I
and
can
then
show you a
developing your
picture.
voice.
I mean, I'm open to
at
some
the back
different
end. And then
stones.
there's a final step that I
At
hope we
home,
get
it was called
time to get to today
millstone.
in measurement.
Here, it has a
these are the
different
big
name,
five
but it's basically
when it
a
comes to how
rectangle
you build
kind of,
this out. So
cut
I'm going to go through
stones
these a little
in
bit
a gray color. And
step by
so,
step.
Something similar to that.
So number one,
Is
optimize.
that
I won't spend
something
a
you
ton of
can
time on
buy
optimize
at a-
because I
at a
assume
wholesale? There's
most of you have some
Alabama
kind of presence on
wholesale
LinkedIn
stone.
to varying degrees, and you probably heard the optimized
Okay.
conversation once. I'm not going to spend a ton
I
of
would
time
love
here.
to get a price.
But I do want to talk about a little bit of the
do this.
basics and some of the forward-thinking stuff.
What is your
Um,
time like?
And when I talk about the basics, I'm really thinking
Eric,
about this
can I-
top real estate.
Friday,
You're
and
starting
I'll
with
be
the
out of
Mind if
town
I
for a couple
And
interrupt
banner is
you?
actually probably one of the more underutilized areas, I would say, for a lot of people, where they might throw something up there like a skyline in Minneapolis. I see that a lot with people locally here,
I was
or some
gonna
kind of
leave in the
branded
morning,
graphic,
but,
like what Rebecca did here, who works at Room and Board. But what I love about what Rebecca
you tell
did
me
is
and I'll wait
this
for you.
isn't. If you look at that, that doesn't. It screams Room and Board, but
Sure,
doesn't scream
it's,
Room and Board at the
1,
same time.
4,
You know what I mean? It doesn't hit you over the
5,
head with it.
7,
It's very subtle, but it still tells a story.
Place, and that's
So the branded graphics, if you work for a
BLEN
company or agency, are great. You can't go wrong with that.
IM place.
But think about what the story those branded graphics can tell, because that's valuable real estate there at that top banner.
in
Or
Birmingham.
if you're on the agency side or the consulting
Right.
side, I always think a good idea to use that branded graphic
Well, it's
or
outside
that
of
banner
Mountain
image
Brook.
is to
Y'all
maybe
were
of
working on
you
the house
speaking at an
next
event
door to me.
or at
It
an
was the
event or
one,
something like
one
that.
that had all the water
you
damage
can,
in the back of it. And so
Kind of highlight that
your crew
thought
was
leadership
out
angle
one day
to a
and I was
certain
talking
extent.
to them and I got
So,
their card.
Just a couple different ways to think about the banner, but in general, just consciously think
I've got
about
some other projects I want
how
you to
you're
look
using,
at, like I'm thinking about putting
that real
some,
estate.
not top brick on the
Headline, also a key
on
area.
the walkway and
Again,
all of
right at the
that.
top.
This flower
So
bed. I
again,
need to
think
do
about
sooner
how you might
rather
use that. I
than
know a lot of
later,
people
so I was gonna
really just put the
see,
title there,
what
which
that would be.
is okay. Again, not wrong,
Um,
but think about, you have a lot of real estate there,
Okay.
and you can use that in many different ways.
Well, if you would just
As
let me know,
Jason
because I've
Falls,
got
my
about an
friend from,
8-hour drive ahead of
Kentucky,
me. What time you think you can
he could
come?
easily just put his title there, but
And
he's
I know
talking
it's
about marrying
32
the practice of digital
feet.
strategy with
If you
marketing and
want an
creative.
email, I
That's
can
pretty
send
interesting.
you a picture of my
And it
old
covers a lot of
house
ground.
where I had it done.
Or
Okay,
Jenna
what is
down
an
here, I like
email?
what she's done with a very common way to describe yourself. See this a lot on
Okay.
Instagram actually, but she's kind
Okay.
of co-opted it for LinkedIn, but using different descriptors to
MEN.
talk about who she is
Okay.
and what she does.
So
Because again, that headline is
A4
important because
men.
not only is it one of the first things people see when they visit your profile, it's also a way that people find you through search. So if you're using LinkedIn to find a job,
MEXMEN. Okay.
or find clients,
MEXMEN.
um,
So A4
those
MEXMEN
keywords that you put in your headline actually become really important.
at iCloud.com.
So thinking consciously about
I'm
how you
gonna send,
develop
as soon as I get over this
your headlines
webinar,
is
I'll
key too.
send you
I
an
just look at
email
that.
with
I
a
see some
picture
hand
that
raising.
shows you the one I had done before.
No, I can't hear.
Right.
Huh?
And then I'll see you Friday morning, you think?
Hey, Eric.
Okay, and I probably stick a ton of time, so if you get by here tomorrow, that would be great. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, bye-bye.
Some people, maybe we got some mute issues. Make sure you have your computer on mute, maybe. I'm going to save questions to the end and just keep going here, if that's okay with everyone. Hopefully we'll have time at the end. I'll carve out some time at the end. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. I'm seeing some positives. Okay. I want to keep going. We'll keep questions for the end again. Hopefully we'll have time. One of the key other areas I see that is underused, I would say, on LinkedIn is this featured section. And this is a great place to really kind of highlight and showcase your best work. And you have the opportunity to add many different kinds of media here, including posts from LinkedIn and articles from LinkedIn, which are pretty common. People use that a lot. People also link to media stories that they've either been featured in, or if you work in PR, like huge placements you've made with maybe, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, whatever the publication might be, or presentations too. So a lot of times you'll see sometimes agency people put capabilities presentations in there, or a presentation you made at a conference or an event. But this is your space to really showcase like your thought leadership, basically. And you might think, what do I know? I don't have any thought leadership. I don't know anything about anything. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So dig down and really think about how you could use this featured section, because everyone's got something they can put there. Even those students I just talked about, Anna, coming out of St. Thomas, I guarantee you she's got something here. So really think about how you could use this to feature your very best work, even if it's a couple posts on LinkedIn to start. Think about how you could use it strategically to showcase your best self. So quickly, a few other areas to optimize that are relatively new. Some of these aren't new, but some of these are kind of new. The pronunciation, if you have a weird name like me, a lot of people don't know how to pronounce my first name. This makes it very easy. You say it out loud, it records it. People know how to say my name then. That's kind of nice. I always like that feature. The pronouns, of course, are a nice feature to ask, or a nice feature to add. I know not everyone adds that, or people have mixed feelings on that. To which I would say, especially if you're on the senior side, you might not think it's relevant to you, and you might not buy into that. But I can tell you from teaching kids at the University of St. Thomas, University of Minnesota last 3 years, the kids sure do. So if you're hiring young people, yeah, they totally are a big supporter of that, and also in some ways it impacts them very much. So it can be as much a signal as anything else, even if you don't really buy in. You also have an opportunity to add a video profile right here with your profile picture. You can make this a quick video, which I've seen some people do. I haven't seen a lot of that, but I think if you're looking for a job, that might be something to think about. Otherwise, I'm not sure that you want to go down that road, but that's something you could think about. This new web URL is a new feature where they give you the opportunity to add a URL right in your kind of your main section, which is kind of cool. You could easily put your company URL there, but my thought was, and that's what I do. I'm a consultant though. I was thinking if I worked at McDonald's though, if you have a side project, blog, podcast, what have you, this would be a great place to stick that because it gives it a little more added visibility. And then you can also add, obviously hashtags right at the top about what kinds of things you follow. Again, I think this is more of a signal or a cue than anything else. But in some ways it kind of signals, to me, it's a signal that they know what they're talking about, or they're a little more savvy on LinkedIn. So take it or leave it, but a small thing I would say to think about. So I got homework for each of these sections, just stuff to think about really. And I tried to break this out into people that might just be starting out on LinkedIn, and then people that have been at it for a while. So if you're just starting out, I would say definitely focus on that profile pic, banner image, and headline, because that's the key to your whole profile. The rest of it is important, but not nearly as important as that little top part. So really think about how those 3 things tell your story. And then if you've been at it a while, really think about that featured section and what kinds of assets could you put there that showcase your best self to people that want to network with you, to people who might want to hire you, anyone that might want to visit your profile section. All right, build. So after you've optimized your profile, you want to start thinking about, obviously building your community. And this is something that is usually an ongoing process, right? Like when you're starting on LinkedIn, like Anna at St. Thomas, she's building her community. She's starting kind of from scratch, really, as a college student or a recent grad. But even those of us like me, been in the industry 25 plus years, I'm always adding people. So the building your community part never goes away. It's not like something you do once and then you get rid of it or you stop doing it. It's a constant process, and therefore you're always looking to add new connections. And you can see from my just a quick list I put together, the connections come from many different areas of your life, right? Obviously, people you've either worked with in the past or you work with now. Industry influencers, people you've met at events, people you volunteered with, maybe even people you've gone to church with, people you admire, people you went to school with. The list is pretty long, but all those people kind of make up your professional community on LinkedIn. And everyone's got different ideas about who, I hear a lot of the conversation around, well, how do I decide who to accept invites from? And how do I decide, that kind of thing. And I don't want to get into a big discussion about that, because I think to me, that's kind of a personal decision. There's pros and cons to both sides. I tend to be pretty open about that, but then again, I'm a consultant, so I get paid to know a ton of people. That's good for me. If I was working on the corporate side, I wouldn't have that same opinion, because you're getting pitched by salespeople all the time, right? So if you let all the salespeople in, they're going to really spam you. So that would change my opinion on that. So it kind of depends on your environment and your workplace, but also depends on what kind of person you are too, and how you want to do that. So that's kind of up to you. But adding new connections, I think, is a pretty, if you think about that as a constant process, I think that's the key. And then the next question becomes quickly after that is become like, what do I do with the invites? Because I know everyone tells me I'm supposed to personalize the invites. How do I do that? Well, I would say it's probably not as hard as you're making it out to be. And what I try to do is keep it really, really simple and brief, as you can see here by just a couple of the recent ones I've sent, and connect it to either a time you met or saw them at an event or something like that. As you can see through the one with Mitch here on the left, I met this gentleman through a common friend. Or is it you're trying to introduce yourself to a new person, in which case you want to find a point of common connection. So in that case, I'd bring up a story of a guy that I met years ago at Best Buy. He worked in social and digital. I wanted to get to know him. It was a cold. I was reaching out to him totally cold. But I looked at his profile and noticed he was a University of Kansas graduate. And I had gone to the University of Kansas for a year. I'm a huge Kansas Jayhawk basketball fan. And having gone there for a year, I knew anyone that goes to that school is definitely a basketball fan. So I thought, there's my point of connection. I'm gonna try to grab coffee with him and play up to the Kansas connection and talk about that. And that opened the door. And next thing you knew, we've now, this is like 12 years later, we're really good friends. We've been on family vacations together. We go golfing together. We go to Kansas games together. It opened the door to a whole new relationship, but that never would have happened without the common connection that I researched through his LinkedIn profile. So those are just a couple of easy ways to, sending invites. The key is really, as many of you have probably grasped from being targeted yourself, don't come anywhere close to selling someone in the invite. Like, you just want to make it super non-threatening and very relationship based, to the point of trying to flatter the other person, I would say. That's the best way in the front door. Just think about making a new friend, because really that's what you're doing. You're making new professional friends. But personalizing those invites is key, and that's kind of how I would do it. The other way to build community, though, in addition to adding new connections and building it that way over time, is not forgetting about those direct messages. I found using direct messages to be absolutely key to just kind of staying in front of people over the years. Kind of like pinging, right? And that's not a great term, but there's a book I read years ago called Never Eat Alone by a guy named Keith Ferrazzi that totally changed my life in terms of networking. And one of the things he was big on is this pinging concept. And I don't like that term, but I love the concept of just kind of staying in front of people. And I usually do that through a mix of like social media and coffees and just getting together with people. But a big way I do that on social media really is these DMs on LinkedIn, where I'm just sending someone a note to say hi. Someone got a new job, I'll do it then. I saw them post about something interesting on LinkedIn, I'll do it then. Whatever the case, just really just popping in and staying in front of them and engaging them in conversation on DMs. And the nice thing about the LinkedIn DMs is, like, most people don't get a ton of these. So like Maria, for example, at Hokinson, Maria's a VP at Dairy Queen. Like I would, if I tried to get in front of her through her inbox, it'd be virtually impossible. But getting in front of her on direct messages on LinkedIn, a little bit easier. So it can play that way too, if you think about it, from that perspective. Other ways to build community, I think, those recommendations are always a nice thing to do too. Obviously it would be people you worked with or for, but I always think that's a nice thing to do. Good karma for you too. The groups, I wouldn't put a lot of effort into. I haven't had great luck with that in the past. I know some people will say, yeah, these groups are great, these aren't, but in general, I haven't found a lot of luck with that. I would rather devote my time and attention to the feed and direct messages and things like that. But really my biggest tip for building community on LinkedIn really is just to be interesting, relevant, and helpful. And we'll touch a little bit on that in a minute here, but you do those three things, you're gonna build a really strong community on LinkedIn very quickly, because you will stand out very fast. So homework here, if you're just standing out or just starting out, what if you made a goal of sending 2 invites a week to new connections? Like you have more opportunity than you think with the new connections. Like two invites a week is not a lot. You can do that. That's a good place to start. If you've been out of a while, I would say send at least 2 DMs a week to reconnect with existing connections. Again, that's not a lot either. And chances are you have lots of opportunity there as well. So 2 little ways to kind of grease the engine a little bit and keep building that community. All right, third step, listen. Listening, we all know, is a key. And I want to kind of start out with like just a quick poll here. And you can respond in the chat, please. Just wondering how you listen on LinkedIn today. Do you just really focus on the feed? Who participates in groups? Do you follow those hashtags? And then lastly, do you look at LinkedIn news each day? It's a lot of ones. Not surprising. Okay, good. Tony, 3 hashtags, huh? I'll have to hear more about that later. Olivia, 4. Okay, so some LinkedIn. So it's a lot of ones. That's good. That's what I expected. With listening to me, and we'll get to hashtags and LinkedIn news in a minute. But I think the key, it really is the feed. So you guys everyone's on the right track with the ones, obviously. But the key is to learn and train your feed to pay attention to the right people. So what I mean by that is I come back to Monica again, right? Like you want to train your feed so the good stuff pops up every time. So you hear a lot of chatter about LinkedIn being a kind of a, just it's all people talking about their jobs, it's all people bragging about themselves, and then all the sales crap on there. And you know what? They're right. It is a lot of that stuff. But if you can learn and train it to filter out that stuff and just learn to pay attention to the right people, it becomes hugely more effective for you. So case in point, Monica, like I told you before, Monica is some of those people, when she says something, I pay attention. I almost always like her comment on it because I want her stuff to show up in my feed more often. So learn, or as you're going through this listening phase on LinkedIn and trying to spend more time there, look for the people that you think are interesting and always like and comment on their stuff, because then their stuff will pop up more often. And that's what you want. You want a feed full of interesting content so you can interact with it and learn. Also pay attention when you pay attention to the right people, keep your radar up for people that you would like to work with or for maybe in the future, right? And always like and comment on their stuff. So my example here is this woman named Hannah Johnson. She works at General Mills. I've known her for years. She worked with my good friend Kevin Hunt for a while. She worked for him at General Mills. She's great. I could easily see myself working for her at some point or with her, either way. But I know she's kind of one of those people, like I like her. I like her style. I've heard great things about her work. Like she seems like someone I would want to work with or for at some point. So yes, I'm going to pay attention when she says something on LinkedIn. And then finally, kind of a general bucket, like people you admire. Like who do you look up to? Who do you really think does a great job with their company or their industry? We all have a number of people that would fall in this bucket. Make sure you're commenting and liking on those people's work as well. So the end goal, obviously, is to create the feed you want. Like and comment on those people's posts. Make sure you're getting outside of your own company. I think that's a kind of a key aspect to this too. Is like, yes, like and comment on all. Like, let's say you work at Cargill. Like, yes, you want to interact with all the Cargill content for sure, but you got to get outside that too. So you're not just in the Cargill bubble. Follow industry influencers and thought leaders you respect. That's one way to get outside the bubble pretty quickly and to introduce new ideas that'll get you thinking differently. And just learn to forget about the garbage. The garbage is there. We all know it's there, but learn to ignore it. Like ignore the garbage and fast forward to the good stuff. And again, the more liking and commenting you do it, the more the feed will get better. It's not going to always be perfect. It's not going to be all great stuff. But if you can just learn to forget about the garbage, I think that'll be a key for you too. And then also another thing to keep in mind too is like anytime you like and comment on a post, right? Like the feed gets smarter and it shows you more of that. But the other thing it does is that stuff shows up in your connections feeds too. So be very cognizant of, and you should be, because we just went through the buckets, right? It's like people you admire, respect, people you want to work with, or people that have interesting stuff to say. Those are all good things. But those posts that you like and comment on are going to show up in your connections feeds. So it's like, these are the people that you're going to be associated with, is what I'm saying. So be sure that these people are really top notch and that they're really trustworthy, they're reliable, they have good reputations, because you liking and commenting on their stuff, you're kind of associated with them. So the hashtag conversation, again, this one, I kind of touched on this before, but it's one of those things. I have tried this multiple times, and I try this every once in a while, especially the social media one, just to check in on it. And I found varying degrees of success with this. I wouldn't spend a ton of time on this. Once in a while, I'll find something, but man, you really got to dig through stuff to find something that's really interesting, I think. So, my advice would be like, try it out, see if it works for you. It hasn't really worked out for me that well, but I continue to try it once in a while. I just don't spend a lot of time on it. LinkedIn News, on the other hand, very easy to incorporate into your routine in terms of, and here's where I stand on this. Everyone's seen this, obviously, on their LinkedIn page. But the benefit in this, I think, is like, it's an easy way to get up to speed on the water cooler topics of the day, right? Kind of like Twitter does it too, obviously, with the trending stories. But like, just glance at this any given day and like click on one or two of them that interest you and just read for like, a minute even. Like, there's your water cooler information for your Zoom calls or your coffees or your meeting with your manager. You can bring up something interesting that you read on LinkedIn. Like, that took you 2 minutes to do, and it would have great value in terms of that little small chit chat that we all struggle with, or well, I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us struggle with. To me, that's the value of LinkedIn News, and that's why I would kind of at least glance at that each day. So homework in this section, if you're just starting out, I think it's all about building that muscle. So this is one that's definitely relevant to when I work with executives and leaders, is like building the muscle of making a habit of spending 5 minutes a day on LinkedIn listening. 5 minutes a day. Everyone has 5 minutes a day. I don't care if you're Elon Musk. I don't care if you're, Eric Hansen. We all got 5 minutes a day. So building the muscle and the habit of doing that is very important when you're just starting out. So I think that's key. If you've been at LinkedIn a while, I think the key then is like honing your listening. So you're already doing the listening, you're already out there. But then it's that kind of stuff about training the feed I talked about, really thinking about and paying very close attention to the right people. Like, find those people you think are interesting, that you want to work with, or that you think have something to say, and make sure you're always liking and commenting on their posts so you see more of it in the future. All right, step 4 is engage. So once you've got through listening, you've built that habit, you're refining your feed, you're getting better there, then it's time to get a little bit more into the engagement phase. This kind of goes with listening a little bit. There's a lot of overlap here. I thought we'd talk a little bit about kind of the liking, commenting, and sharing being the key cornerstones of engagement. And like, what kind of content do I like? What should I really look at closely? And what I try to do here is kind of break it down into a few key buckets. And these are just a couple examples from actually just recently. But the kinds of posts that I like, usually the big news from my connections, whether it's, what something that Andy just said here, where he's stepping down from the board. That's an easy one to like. I actually like Dan comments on that one. Or whether it's Anna on the right here, was another Tommy student of mine who got a job at Coleman Boy, talking about some big news there. That's easy stuff for all of us to like and support, because that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're throwing your support behind a friend. Easy. Always do that. Meaningful posts from your company or agency you work for is also a good thing, right? Again, it gets that brand love, right? You want to be prideful of the place you work. And liking that stuff ensures you see a little bit more of it in your feed, and you want to be supportive of your company. That's a good one too. Posts from your alma mater once in a while, also find that pride group, I think are a good idea. And then getting outside of your bubble again, of your company or agency, is interesting or motivational posts from, those influencers or people you admire, like the Monica Wyants of the world, right? For me, like who's your Monica, or who are your Monicas? Who do you find really interesting? Who really gets you thinking differently? Always like and comment on their stuff. That's an easy one too. So those are just some examples and just some things to think about when you're trying to formulate what kinds of stuff do I like. Now commenting is where it really gets interesting, because this is where you have to put a little brain power behind it, right? It takes 2 seconds to like something, but to comment, sometimes you got to think a little bit, right? And my take here is that this is a lot easier than you might think, because there's some easy opportunities based on what I see. So case in point, the new job post, right? So here's my friend Gabby, got a new job recently. Some of you know Gabby. Awesome. She's been waiting a long time for this. I know it's a big deal for her, right? So for me, like, I'm not best friends with Gabby, but I know her pretty well. I don't want to just leave a congrats, right? To me, you're kind of phoning it in. When anyone gets one of these new job posts, that's a golden opportunity to add a very meaningful content, because if you look through the comments of any of those posts, you'll see a lot of them are the auto-populated congrats, right? Like everyone's just doing that. If you're the person that adds the thoughtful comment, that person is going to remember you for a long time, probably, because you took the time to add some context, to add some story behind it, and really, make them feel even better on a day where they're feeling pretty damn good anyways. So that's number one. I think number two is kind of like those, again, it's kind of like those ones in your industry or your sector that really get you thinking, or just kind of strike a note with you, right? So this one with Rebecca was an interesting one, I thought, because she was talking about, she's doing one of those holiday posts, or she was sharing a room and board post, but she was talking about this holiday post. And I thought, man, brands do those holiday posts all the time, but this one is really specific to room and board. What a great job, right? So like calling that out. And again, I wouldn't say this is a super thoughtful comment, but it was a little bit more than just like, great job, And then finally, just anytime you're people that you would consider to be, pretty good friends, close friends, people you worked with closely over the years, that kind of like inner circle type thing. Anytime they post something that's even mildly like interesting, or you can tell it's something they really been thinking about a long time, that's a golden opportunity to weigh in too with a thoughtful comment. So in this case, it was my friend Gabby, who's been talking, she's switching kind of jobs. She's going into a solo lifestyle, and she's kind of, you can tell she's kind of talking about networking a little bit. Obviously that's a hot topic for me, and I've known her for many years, so I have a lot to weigh in on that. So that was an easy one for me to kind of comment on and add a little color to the situation. But those are kind of some of the posts that I choose to comment on. So think about what are those things where you could really add a perspective or a unique angle, right? The jobs, changes, the promotions we talked about, that's an easy one. Post discussing industry topics you find interesting, that's another pretty easy one. But it could be posts from your company or your agency where you can add a meaningful kind of angle to the discussion, or posts from bigger influencers where you think you have a unique perspective. You have a more unique perspective than you think. I will tell you that. This is another thing I talk about with the Tommies all the time at St. Thomas, in terms of like, even those kids in school, like they think they don't have anything to add. It's like, of course you have something to add. Like you're 18 years old, 18 to 21 years old, you have a much different viewpoint on the world than people my age, that's for sure. So share that. That's interesting to people. So lastly, sharing is the other big one I see. Again, I go back to the beginning of the presentation. This is another thing I see a lot of people doing. And the challenge with the sharing right now is that LinkedIn's not prioritizing. So if you look at, I've done a lot of research with executives over the years, and recently, if you look at executives when they share the company post, you'll notice the engagement levels are way less than if they share original content. So the algorithm's kind of against you from the beginning. And for that reason, it's never really a great idea. I think you can do it once in a while, but I think it does make sense when you have something you really want to highlight and you don't want to step on the person's touchdown call, for example. So these are two recent examples from me where the woman on the left, her name is Leanne Rasicek. She's now the CEO of this organization called Women Venture. Well, she worked in digital marketing and communications for the first, 15 years of her career. And she made this huge jump to being the CEO of a nonprofit. Like, I don't know many people that can do that, but Leanne's certainly one of them. But that was a big move for her. So like, I could have written my own post about that, but I thought this is her moment. I'm just going to share this post and give her some accolades because this is all about her. that's the kind of thing I would probably share. Or it could be a company post every once in a while. I think that's probably a good idea too. I just won't go overboard with it, and keep the sharing to a minimum, and keep the unique content is where you really want to pay off your time. So if you're just starting out with homework here, I think, what if you just liked 2 posts a week and commented on 1 post a week? That's a nice, easy place to start. And you build the muscle and you move on from there, but just start small and try to move up. Whereas if you've been at it a while, could you take a strategic approach to your engagement and figuring out how to like and comment on the right post? It goes back to the listening thing. You want to curate the feed so it works for you. That's the key to the listening and engaging as you go on. And actually, another one I would add, if you've been at it a while, is like those promotion posts, man. Think about adding a really thoughtful comment to those promotion posts and see how that pays off. I guarantee you that makes a big difference if you do it consistently. Okay, last but not least, developing content. I know this is the big one. And this one kind of starts with, once you've kind of gone through all those other steps, you get a better feel for LinkedIn. If you're not a power user already, if you go through those other steps, sooner or later, you're going to start to become very familiar with the kinds of content that work on LinkedIn. And that should help you shape your own content pillars, because it's going to be different for everybody, obviously. And the key with the content pillars is you don't have to like develop like these 3 content pillars and then everything you write has to fit neatly within one of those 3 things. That's not how it works, I don't think. It's more like it becomes a guide, right? Like how am I going to think about what I post? Oh yeah, my pillars are this, this, and this. It's really just to kind of guide your thinking a little bit. And with Stacia, I decided to share what we do with Stacia, what she does. And she kind of fits her content into these kind of 3 buckets, right? Inspiration. She has a ton of stuff around inspiration. She's really good at that stuff. In this case, she's mimicking like the Sarah Blakely posts if you follow her on LinkedIn. She talks a lot about her story as an entrepreneur, as a working mother, as a women leader. She has so many different stories that kind of intertwine. She's really great at that too, like this long form storytelling combined with visuals. And then she offsets that with this kind of fun humor bucket, where the post on the right, you can see there was this, I think she put her pants on backwards that day. She's talking about how busy she was and she put her pants on backwards, and got so many people commenting that, oh my God, yeah, I did the same thing 2 weeks ago, blah, blah, blah. So like this, from a leadership perspective, that's big for her because that allows her to kind of open up and show that, she's just a person just like anyone else. That's just kind of the leader she is. And I think that works pretty well for her. So those are her content pillars. Whereas like my content pillars are a little bit different, right? So like I am going to focus a lot on that middle one with the thought leadership, just because I'm a consultant. That's where my bread's buttered. I have a blog, I have a podcast, I have certain things that I can leverage there. So that's a big one for me. Engagement focused content is another big one where I will I recently went on vacation and I wanted to read some new books. So I just purely polled the audience, like, what should I want to read? Some self-improvement books. What should I read? I know everyone's reading those. And I got, you can see here, I got 36 different recommendations. So again, I'm thinking about the way people are using LinkedIn. People want to weigh in. You just got to give them a chance to do it every once in a while. So that's a big bucket for me. And then number 3 is that teaching bucket. So I teach every spring. That's full of opportunities for me to, showcase speakers that come into class, talk about the students, talk about case studies we're talking about in class, all sorts of stuff. That's an easy bucket for me too. But again, not all my content fits in all 3 of these buckets. It's just a guide, but it's an important one as I think about what kinds of things I post as I go through the month. So some other tips in terms of finding your voice on LinkedIn. I think, again, you can learn from people you admire. So again, as you identify those people through the listening phase, right, then just notice like the kinds of content they put together, like you thinking differently. So like for my example here is the guy on the left, his name is Joel Lehman. He used to work at Thomson Reuters. He works at the London Stock Exchange, I think now is his current job. And he's always been very interesting to me. Firm grasp of social, good guy. Met him a couple of times. He spoke at my class at St. Thomas. But he made this post a number of months ago. And again, he hit on a very common thing, right? All it was like a birthday message, right, to his boss. He could have easily just sent him an email, right? But instead, he's a musically inclined guy, and he took a video of himself singing him happy birthday on the piano. Like, that's simple but brilliant. So that got me thinking differently about how I, maybe I do some birthday messaging to some people. So think about the people you admire, notice the kind of content they're posting, and like, you're going to pick up little bits and pieces as you go along. That'll shape your voice. Also keep in mind, you don't always need a visual. Like, I know that's a big thing that a lot of people talk about on LinkedIn. And I would say a lot of the times you do, right? You want to take visuals of yourself. You want to show yourself as much as possible, as uncomfortable as that is for most people. But you don't always need a visual. I do tons of posts where I have just text. And if the text is good enough and you strike a nerve with people, that will, generate a discussion or a conversation or get people interested. You don't always need a visual, so don't let that hang you up. Like, I always have to have a selfie of myself or a stock photography or something like that. You don't always have to have that. That shouldn't stop you from posting on LinkedIn. And then think about using all the formats, right? Because I think about when, as a social media consultant, like what I would coach my clients on doing, yeah, use all the formats, right? They're all there for your disposal. Like, you should use them as much as you can, or at least mix them in every once in a while. And as individuals, we should do that too, right? So text posts, photo posts, multiple photo posts, like the one on the right here. Make sure we're on, everyone's on mute. Another, I can hear some background noise. Sorry. The poll functionality too. That's another often overlooked one I see, where people aren't using that as much. That's an easy way to engage your audience and get some good feedback on things you might be thinking about. Other tips, when it comes to frequency, you don't have to post as often as you think. I think what's much more important is consistency and showing up in that feed week over week. So to put it a different way, like, you don't need to post 5 times a week. 1 time a week would be enough for most people, but 1 time a week, every week, that's the key. So it's not quantity, it's quality. Keep in mind, those personal and professional lines are increasingly blurred, but you can and should take advantage of that as you're comfortable, right? Because we know if you start looking at LinkedIn more, you'll quickly realize the more personal the post, usually the more engagement or the more conversation it stirs up. Like, people want to get personal on LinkedIn. You see a lot of conversation too about, like, well, LinkedIn's turned into Facebook. It's like, yeah, and a little bit. And I think that's a good thing, because some of these personal things we should be talking about in a professional setting. So everyone's got their own line on where they stop in terms of what they talk about personally, but think about what you could talk about, what you would be comfortable with, because chances are other people are feeling the same way. Number 3, think about ways you can shine the spotlight on other people. I just did this again yesterday, and I always feel fantastic when I do it, and it's always well-deserved. So it's just a win-win, like, there's so many good things going on. And what I did the other day was, like, there's been some pretty crappy news recently, the last week or so. So I thought, well, there's also a lot of good news that I see in my feeds, where people are getting new jobs. One woman started a podcast. There's all this awesome stuff going on. I'm going to highlight that right now, just as a glimmer of hope, at least for the time being, and we'll just see where that goes. So think about how you can cast that spotlight on people that you care about and love, and or you've managed in the past, or whatever the case may be, and lift them up from time to time. Think about offering up your perspective on current industry events or case studies. That, again, we all have unique inputs on these things. You don't think that your input or your perspective isn't interesting. It probably is, way more than you think it is. So, pick out a case study, go to Digiday, go to Adweek, go to, pick your industry publication, find a case study you find interesting, and talk about it. Like, that's all you have to do. And you might be surprised how interesting people find that. However, the last caveat I'll say is, this kind of goes back to the personal opening up a little bit, but you don't always have to say something. So there might be a topic that comes up, or a big subject that comes up, and everyone's talking about it. If you're not comfortable talking about it, or you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. So you don't always have to say something. So for homework here, after you've completed those first 4 steps, you've got those in a better spot. Think about just posting once a month. Again, it's about consistency. It's not about frequency. If you never posted on LinkedIn and you went just to posting once a month for a year and you had 12 posts built up, that's a big step from 0. So once a month, start small. If you've been at it a while, think about those content pillars and how do they align with your interests and passions, because everyone's got different ones. So what could be your content pillars? Give that some thought. That's a good weekend thing to just kind of put in the back of your head and just like mull it over while you're drinking coffee on a Saturday morning. And as those crystallize in your mind, start to build those out with content and just kind of see how it goes. You can always change them. It's not like they're set in stone forever. But having that as a guide, I think, would really help most people. Okay, I'm going to skip measurements since I know there's a lot of questions, and I'm just going to fast forward to discussing questions. Before we go there, again, if you want to learn more about me or follow me, my newsletter, anything like that, go to erichansen.com. If you're interested in working with me, again, I talked about the LinkedIn coaching. If you have an executive or a leader that needs help, you can send me a note. I'd be happy to chat. And obviously, you can always follow me on LinkedIn. So questions, I know we got a ton of them. So does anyone, I don't think everyone's got the chance to talk. So maybe I should, does anyone have a quick question they want to ask? Let's just try it that way.
Hi, thank you so much for all of this information. I've sat in on a couple other LinkedIn webinars and still took a lot of like really tangible takeaways out of this. So I really appreciate that you were speaking to both like from a beginner level and from a you've been at it a while level. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about the idea of a digital etiquette or a social etiquette that might exist on LinkedIn that could be different from other social media platforms, or if that doesn't really exist in your perspective, just to hear more on your thoughts on that.
That's a good point. So I would say maybe one thing would be I would probably take it easy on like the emojis, for example. I think that is one thing that obviously very acceptable on like TikTok, Instagram, almost every other social network. But on LinkedIn, like it's not like you don't want your personality to come through, but it's just a little more buttoned up, So I don't see as much of that. I'm not saying you have to steer clearly away from it, but I would pay attention to that. I would also pay attention to, at the same time, I'd also pay attention to like grammar, especially again, in our industry, I'm thinking, because like it's easy to go shorthand on like Instagram, for example. So I see this all the time with the Tommies, right? Like they're writing shorthand and it's like, that's great on TikTok, but like don't do that on LinkedIn, man. Like people are trying to hire you based on your writing ability. And if you're writing in shorthand, the old people are going to look at you a little sideways for right or wrong. I mean, that's just the way it is right now. So those would probably be the 2 big things, and that I would probably think in terms of etiquette on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you. I do have one other quick question.
Okay.
So I know that in the business world, we do a lot of like group projects per se of like, for example, I'm in PR. And so recently I ghost wrote something for one of our clients, and I'm curious, like the client gets the byline, but is that something that it would still be appropriate for me to share in the features section on LinkedIn?
Yes, definitely. Like a byline you wrote on behalf of a client, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for sure. Yes, it's your writing experience. So like that is a demonstration of what you can do, which is exactly the kind of stuff you want to put there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Agreed. Other questions?
Well, I have another question if no one else does.
No one's going to pop in. Go ahead.
Can you tell me a little bit about LinkedIn Premium? I've heard so much on LinkedIn, of course, trying to convince me that it would be worthwhile. In your experience, what would be the benefit, or what would be a reason to jump on that?
I'm probably not the best person to ask about that because I don't have a lot of experience with LinkedIn Premium. I've never really had subscribers, so I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask. Someone else might want to chime in if they do, but I do not. Anyone else have experience with Premium that they can speak to?
I would just add that there is a free month available. So
That's true.
I would recommend trying that out. I'm actually doing a free month right now. And I'm actually enjoying it for a variety of reasons, but I think it's just a good way to kind of play around in the premium platform and see what features might be the most beneficial to you and if it's worth continuing.
What are you finding beneficial so far?
Well, personally, I like being able to see who's looking at my profile.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just, you know, in my point in my career, just kind of understanding who's looking at my profile from and trying to understand if there's things I should change or add to my profile to kind of help me build that personal brand. And seeing the types of people who are looking at it kind of tells me like what is drawing them to it. If I'm seeing, you know, certain titles are looking, or, you know, people within certain industries are looking, it can kind of help me decide what I should add or change on my profile to make sure that I'm getting put in front of people that I want to be put in front of.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing. Other questions?
I have another one. So on your LinkedIn profile, I've noticed a lot of people have their profile image, but then behind it, there's that big banner. Do you have any thoughts about what should be in that banner? Or because I noticed some people will put like a company information and some people will just put like, I don't know, if you could just talk to some of the strategy of handling the banner.
You mean the banner at the top? Right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
big picture that's not your profile picture.
I bet you must have joined late. We talked about that right at the beginning. So I would say there, my advice there was like, if you have the branded graphics are very popular with companies and agencies and stuff like that. And that's fine. You're not going to go wrong with that. But I usually like to coach people where it's like, that's your chance to kind of show off a little bit of your personality. So if you don't want to use the branded graphic that your company or agency offers you, like really use a photo that brings your personality to light. So like the example I was showing before is like, I see a lot of like Minneapolis skyline photos. And to me, that's a miss because like, we know where you live. We see that in your profile. Like that's not adding anything, but like, so I have a friend that I'm coaching right now. And he's one of those skiers who helipads in, like he takes the helicopter in, like a serious skier. It's a big part of his life and it's a big hobby of his. And he's got some really cool pictures of him doing that. I was like, use that as your banner image because it like rounds him out, right? Like we know he's like this agency owner guy, he's a high powered guy, tons of experience in industry, but like that is different and that will make him stand out. So I would say use it to kind of maybe showcase your personality and your maybe just your life a little bit more thought. I mean, I'm not saying put a family picture back there, but like what other things can bring your background, your personality to life a little differently than just a branded graphic. Not that that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you. And it looks like there's another question in the chat as well.
Let's look at the chat. Any advice on LinkedIn advertising? Yep, small client doing cool things is ready to go. CEO is willing to write content, but since this is a new area for him, he's wondering if an organic strategy will be enough. So, okay, Sherry, you're talking about the company profile though, not his individual profile, right? Or his or her? Both, okay. I would say, well, I will say this on with the LinkedIn advertising for the company pages can be pretty effective, although it is expensive. So it's a little bit more expensive than you would see on like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, stuff like that. But the argument is like, it's a lot of times it's B2B, it's a longer lead time. How much is a lead worth to you? It's higher dollar amounts around across the board. So more expensive, but depends how you're using it. I've seen a lot of success with like the lead gen forms versus like awareness stuff. So it kind of depends how you want to use the LinkedIn advertising. I'm not sure I would do that on the personal side though. I wouldn't use advertising on the personal side. I would just go organic there. Again, if it's an executive using organic, he or she should have a pretty big network. And I think that would, it would just getting them to do more organic stuff would be a huge step in the right direction. And that would be enough. because what I'm seeing is, again, I should do a different deck on executives versus the company page, but like, I have so many examples of like for example, like Jeff Martha, he's the CEO of Medtronic. If you look at Jeff Martha's posts sometimes, or a lot of the times actually, and then look at Medtronic's posts. Medtronic, huge company, I don't know how many followers they have, tons. His posts outflank the corporate page a lot of the time by a wide margin. And that's very common. So like the personal profiles are just dusting the company pages right now. So that organic engagement is hugely valuable. You don't need to advertise half the time. Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock. I'm not going to keep people on here longer, but I see some questions on here. I'm going to try to maybe answer these independently via email, maybe with a blog post, something like that. I'll get to them. But I appreciate everyone being on the call today. Good luck LinkedIn. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you out there. I saw some familiar faces on here and some new ones. So look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn. And happy 4th of July weekend. Let's see.